All right, so let's get started with our training on job development and relationship development. I addressed this with a different group and just want to say it again here. I know a number of us don't have the actual job development function in our position, but that doesn't mean that these principles can't be applied to a number of different areas. And I'll try in my examples to bring that out for folks so they can connect those dots of different areas that the quote unquote job development techniques can be used in. So just a quick word about myself. I am currently working in the community inclusion initiative. I'm the community inclusion manager. And what that is basically helping clients to be included more in the community, as the name implies. So we've had the first phase of this initiative has been to do outings and bringing in speakers to our various locations. Now we are on to the second phase, which is volunteer opportunities, and then we will be rapidly moving to the third phase, which is developing group employment opportunities. So I thank everyone for your help and support in making this initiative an early success, and we look forward to grow and build on that success as we move forward. So I just want to touch on the goals of today's session. Firstly, we want to give you all a functional understanding of the 3 cups of tea method. A number of you may have been exposed to this through other trainings, but we would just want to make sure that you're coming away from this training with a functional understanding of that 3 cups of tea method. In addition to that, we want you to be using these techniques on a day-to-day basis. One of the biggest measures of a successful training is if we actually see the learner, we see our coworkers utilizing the skills that you're learning in the training, even outside of work, is really ideal. And then lastly, we would like you to improve your professional and personal lives by some of the skills that we're learning. And I think this is a big goal, but I think if we apply these things, I know my life has been impacted by some of the things that I've learned that I'm going to pass along to you today, and I hope the same for all of you. So I just want to start off about a humanity and our history of working together. You know, a lot of times we hear in the news and the news cycles a lot of negativity, a lot of people clashing, not getting along. But humanity does have a long and varied history of working together. Going all the way back to biblical times, there's a story in the Bible called the Tower of Babel, where a number of individuals at that time, really all the inhabitants on earth got together to build this tower. The tower wasn't necessarily spoken positively about in the story, but the fact that people were working together, and there's a quote that says, if man works together, or woman implied as well, there's nothing that they can't accomplish. So just an idea of when we work together, we can do so much greater things. Another example from history is another ancient example of the Silk Road, which brought together ancient China with the western part of the known world at that time. It was a road that obviously silk was traded along this road, but other things, including spices and different things that came from the east to the west. Along this road, there were many different civilizations, kinds of people that the traders needed to pass through. And in each one of those instances, there was a lot of collaboration, working together that needed to occur to make this such a success for that early commerce. The first Thanksgiving is another example. Many of us know this story, but the Pilgrims came to this country. Their first year here was actually a disaster because they weren't working together with anyone here, but then they were met by the Native Americans. The Native Americans showed them a number of agricultural methods that helped to establish them in this country. And then lastly, the United Nations, over 190 countries that have to work together across various cultures. You could probably say to sometimes a greater degree of success or sometimes a lesser degree of success, but it is a goal of the United Nations to work together, and really with the lofty goal of world peace. So we've got our 90s corny graphic. You've probably seen this in maybe one of your elementary schools, but I wanted to throw that in there just because of a little bit of the humor with it. But it's all about relationships. And, it may be a little corny, but it is actually all about relationships. And that's what this training is about. We're going to build on that history across the ages of humanity, that was about building relationships, and we're going to boil that down to a method that we're going to teach you today, the 3 cups of tea method, and then some additional relationship building skills at the end. But first, I would like to talk about why we don't build relationships. So it's important to understand what are some of the barriers that we discover when we try to build effective relationships in a personal, professional environment. One of those reasons is the fear of rejection. We just don't know what that individual on the other end is going to say, what they're going to do. Are they going to reject us? Are they going to, say something that hurts our feelings or what have you? The fear of rejection is a big reason why we don't build relationships. We don't know how. Maybe we didn't grow up having a lot of friends. Maybe we had a lot of rejection and we just have never developed this skill, so we don't know how. And anxiety about doing something new. There's a ton of different fears that people have, but definitely one of those fears is being in a group, meeting new people. So this anxiety of doing something new really plays into why we don't build relationships. And if there's any other reasons, we had a number of great collaboration and great comments from some of our other groups. One of the other individuals in the other groups had mentioned that people don't build relationships because sometimes somebody has a bad reputation. Maybe you have a new colleague that's being transferred to your department, and maybe their reputation precedes them, and individuals have built them up as maybe they're a person that's difficult to get along with. Maybe they're a person that I don't know, sits in the wrong spot at the lunch table or what have you, but they have a reputation for doing things, and we kind of naturally say, well, I believe what my other colleagues are saying about this individual, so I'm going to kind of pull back and not build a relationship with that person. I thought that was insightful. If you have any comments on other reasons why we don't build relationships, feel free to throw those in the chat, and I should see those momentarily. So the 3 cups of tea method actually comes from a Pakistani proverb. Actually, I should say the idea at the foundation of this is a Pakistani proverb where we get the first cup of tea. When you have that first cup of tea with an individual, you're still a stranger. You're just finding out, you're kind of understanding the lay of the land, so to speak, with that person. But once you get to that second cup of tea, that follow-up, you begin to be a friend. You hit it off on the first cup of tea, now you're a friend. And by that third cup of tea, you're actually a family member. You've developed a deep trust with that individual. And, we could probably debate if, you can become a family member after 3 cups of tea, but the idea and the principle there definitely stands. When you are going back to meetings, you're spending time with people in a social setting even, you are developing that trust, you're developing that relationship. And it's that understanding that the 3 cups of tea relationship development model is really built on. So the 3 cups of tea method defined really is relationship and job development model that emphasizes 3 meetings. So when I'm talking about 3 cups of tea, first cup, second cup, third cup, really just be in your mind thinking about meetings. These are 3 different meetings, 3 different touch points that form the foundation of this philosophy. And those meetings have to be with a decision maker. I emphasize the decision maker because we can go through the wrong door with individuals. We can get into a conversation with someone, and that may be a good conversation for another reason in our life, but not for the reason that will lead to opportunities for whatever we're doing in our work, or if we're trying to develop a relationship for another reason. So that decision maker that can get us to the opportunities, that can get us to the goal and the objective that we're trying to meet. So the purpose of the first cup of tea, and we're going to jump into these right now. We're going to start the first, second, third, obviously. But the purpose with the first cup of tea is just to set up a time to meet with the employer to learn about the business. So this is an introduction, maybe a small pitch that we're getting into with this individual. Could be an employer, could be a community partner, a potential sales prospect, whatever it may be. This is that introduction, that first pitch, that first cup of tea. And it's really the first step in building the relationship. This is where everything starts. It should only take 5 to 10 minutes. You're not telling this prospective employer, sales prospect, whomever it may be, you're not talking to them at this point about everything you're able to offer them. You're certainly not getting into opportunities for you to collaborate and work together. That will come later on down the line. This is just the first step. It's very quick. It's very simple. So once again, the concentration is on getting that follow-up meeting. If you keep in your mind for this first cup of tea, if you keep in your mind that I'm trying to get to the longer form meeting, which is the second cup of tea, you will be successful. If you're thinking for this first cup of tea, I've got to get all my information out this first go around, that won't be a success. You'll likely overwhelm that person. That person may not be looking for all that information. Just getting that second meeting is what you're looking for, and making sure that it's at a convenient time for them. Don't start by asking for a job. Don't start by asking for a tour. An example I used from a different class was, you may be trying to build a relationship with a parent. Don't start by asking that parent of a client, if their child or their the individual that they're working with, if they can go on all these outings and do all these things. Build that relationship first and make it to the ask within the 3 cups of tea method before you're actually laying that out there. That shouldn't happen in the first cup of tea. The first cup of tea is about slowing down and introducing yourself. You'll have an opportunity to get to that ask in the third cup of tea, but right now, just focus on building that relationship correctly and do a great job of introducing yourself, getting the other person's name, and starting that relationship off on a positive note. And make sure, Michelle will appreciate this one, make sure that you actually get the person's name right. I was in a meeting the other day, and I was saying someone's name, and it was a letter off. It was so make sure that you get that person's name right. And if you don't, it is what it is. You apologize and you get it right the next time and you move on. So how to prepare for a Zoom meeting, but really this is for that first cup of tea. So we got the funny picture of the cat being taped to the wall. This individual was prepared for a Zoom meeting, so we didn't have a cat running across the screen. If you're a cat lover, I'm not advocating that we do that actually to animals, but it is a kind of funny picture. So the first cup of tea is all about preparation. Now, I understand maybe what you're thinking. What if I run into someone at a networking event or something like that and it's a chance encounter? Of course, that can happen. You still want to be prepared with some general information about what you do, what you're thinking of doing, the purpose of being at that network event. You don't want to just go to these things just thinking, well, I'm just going to get some treats and walk around and, maybe grab some free stuff or something like that. No, you want to actually go to these events intentionally. So there still is preparation involved, but there's even more preparation involved when you actually have an individual you're going to meet with in a targeted way. So preparation is the key all throughout the 3 cups of tea, but really that starts right away in the beginning with the first cup of tea. Here's some tips for preparation for that first cup of tea. You want to look up basic background information on the company. If we're going along with our example of a parent that you're trying to build a relationship, most of the individuals that we receive an intake on have some sort of background intake information. Read that stuff. Understand the client, understand what you can about the parent. Do they live in the area? Do they have other kids? Maybe that could play into a time commitment type of thing. So just try to understand whatever you can about their background. That will help you moving forward. Know and avoid the busy times. This could apply to the parent, but this is definitely geared towards employers that we're trying to target. Don't go into a Starbucks at 8 in the morning and expect to speak to someone about a job at that time. Be thinking beforehand, is this going to be a good time? And it's never a bad idea to ask that person, even if we're talking to a parent, is this a good time to talk? That should be when we're building that relationship right away, that should be a common phrase that we hear ourselves saying. Is this a good time to talk? You'll be successful. People will appreciate the respect that you're giving them and their time. Look to see if there's any prior contact with the company, parent, the client, whatever it may be in Salesforce. This is doing our due diligence. This is just making sure that we're aware. It's never a good thing to find out from the person that we're speaking to that, oh, someone just was in here last week from your agency. Now, you still may want to speak to that employer, even if somebody else was in there a week prior. That doesn't mean that it's off limits, but you want to know that, and you want to have that information rather than being informed of it and blindsided about it prior to. You want to have that information prior to. You don't want to find out about it when you're speaking to that person. Bringing your phone. This is an easy one for most of us. We don't go anywhere without our phone. That's another anxiety that people have of being away from their phone. So this should be an easy one for everybody. But I know I've done it before. Just ran in somewhere, set my phone down, and I didn't have my phone. And that's where my schedule is, that I can jot a quick note down if I don't have a notebook. It's very important as we're trying to develop relationships. Our phone is going to be our friend. A notebook is another good option for writing things down, and we need something to take notes. So a notebook is a good option. And then, of course, business cards. Business cards are one of those things that I don't know if they're on their way out. I don't see a ton of people still using them, but they certainly are used by certain people. And so you want to be prepared that if somebody is offering a business card or you can offer them a business card, that you actually have those business cards with you. So when it comes to the actual nuts and bolts of the first cup of tea, so everything we've been talking about is kind of talking around the edges of it, but what are we looking to do? Just give the individual your name, your employer, what you do, and this should be very short and very high level. You're not talking about every single thing that you do within your job description. Just BPI or whatever your agency's name is an organization, nonprofit organization that works with people with disabilities, helps to further people in the community, as general as you can possibly make it. And then you are going to tell them why you would like that next meeting. Remember, the first cup of tea is about getting that longer format, 15 to 30-minute meeting for the second cup of tea. Why you want that meeting. You want that meeting to talk about X, Y, and Z, and then having dates and times available. This is a very important one here. It is for many, many people, if you want a meeting and you don't have those dates and times, it's going to be a pet peeve for them. You want to be able to supply those dates and times so they can look through their calendar and just say, okay, this one works, rather than them having to look through their calendar, giving you a bunch of options, and then you come back and say something doesn't work. Make sure that you do the legwork on that and just give them the dates and times for that. Here's an example of the first cup of tea. I have it labeled the pitch because in a way it is an elevator pitch. It is that first sales pitch, so to speak. And this is what that looks like. I'll just read it off quickly here. Hello, my name is Dorothy Parker, and I work for Job Opportunities here in town. I'm an employment specialist, and my job is to introduce employers to people who have the skills those employers need. One of my responsibilities is to learn about local businesses. That's what you're telling what you want to do. Would it be possible to schedule a 15 to 30-minute appointment with you to learn more about what you do here and the type of person who is a successful employee at your business? Very simple. 30 to 60 seconds, shouldn't be much longer than that. And that gives an individual that you're speaking to a very low burden of saying, yes, absolutely, I can give you 15 to 30 minutes to answer some of your questions. And it is successful. I've seen it, I've lived it, I've done it many, many times. It's a very successful technique. I did have in our in-person trainings, I had some activities and some exercises that wouldn't have translated well to the virtual. So just a plug for the in-person trainings. I'm happy that you all are here. For those who will view this afterwards, thank you for taking some time out to view this and hopefully better your professional development. But it's just a quick plug for those that are local that can come and see the in-person trainings. But just a reminder for the first cup of tea, you want to keep things very simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't psych yourself out that this is the most difficult thing in the world. It's not. Practice that elevator pitch or that pitch that we went through. Practice something like this and then keep it simple. Very, very simple. And remember, your first cup of tea, it's not your only cup of tea. It's just the first cup of tea, and you're asking for that second cup of tea. Now, if someone turns you down and they don't want to have a second cup of tea, they want to remain a stranger to you, well, that is what it is. Obviously, we can't do anything about that, but we do our best to be professional. And, some people are just, it's not going to be the right time. You can always ask them, could we follow up on this in a few months or whatnot? That would be fine to do as well, but it's not always going to be successful. But I can tell you most of the time it is. You're asking for that second cup of tea. Always follow up. Now, this is a very important one just on business etiquette. Always follow up to confirm that second cup of tea. 1 or 2 business days prior to the meeting date is preferable. You probably get away with if it's an afternoon meeting earlier that day, but it's always a good thing to follow up. It shows professionalism. Now, with the second cup of tea, here's the purpose. The purpose for the second cup of tea is really to learn as much as you possibly can about that company, that parent, that client, whatever it may be, that community partner that we want to start volunteering with, whatever it may be, and then to continue to build that relationship. Everything that you're doing with these cups of tea is you're building a relationship. And if all you're trying to do is to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible, you're most likely blowing through a lot of signs, a lot of things that are important, and you're not building that relationship the right way. Slowing down to make sure that you're doing the cups of tea and taking your time on that relationship is the way to go, not to just try to get to the ask, get to this, whatever it may be, as quickly as possible. So you're learning in this second cup of tea. Once again, it's a very short interaction. Ideally, these will be 15 to 30 minutes. If you're a little bit on the longer winded side, you maybe go up to 40, 45 minutes, but certainly within an hour, this meeting can be accomplished. And that's probably even a good idea of scheduling for about an hour and then making sure to let them know we're going to probably only take 15 to 30 minutes of time, and then following through and making sure that you're only taking the allotted amount of time. So how to prepare for this? Once again, preparation. As I said earlier, preparation throughout. This is where you really know. You know who the target is. You know that you have the right person there. This is where you begin to research, is in that second cup of tea. You want to get on their website if they have that. If you're, I used an example in one of the earlier sessions as this could be like an interview. You know, that first cup of tea could be like a screening call. The second cup of tea could actually be the interview. You want to take a look at this individual's social media accounts. You want to see what that looks like, what they're interested in. That's great. But then also, if there's anything inappropriate out there, if you're looking to bring on an employee, you want to make sure that you're monitoring those things. This is where that research comes in. Don't skip that step. Be able to have a number of talking points that have been the direct result of your research. So how to prepare for this? It's really about understanding and memorizing the three elements, sorry, the three elements of the second cup of tea. You're going to greet, you're going to do a quick, pleasantries, a quick, just getting to know each other, talking a little bit, maybe make some small talk. Someone recommended earlier that this could be a great opportunity where you would maybe talk about personal interests. We like to talk about the weather a lot, especially in Wisconsin here. We love to talk about that. You can do that, but also too, try to read that person. And you may not be the best at reading people if you're just starting this. So just stick with the script. But for every individual, for every person, they're going to have their own style. And maybe your style is to try to make that personal connection. And that can be very effective for certain people. But we do the greeting, then we go really on to the meat and potatoes of the thing, which is asking questions. This is the key point. This is the purpose. We're asking questions and then asking if it would be okay to follow up for that third cup of tea. So asking questions, and then the final question is, could I follow up for that third cup of tea? You're not going to say third cup of tea. Could I follow up with you to discuss this opportunity further? Whatever it may be, whatever that looks like in your case. So I just want to say that there are an infinite number of good questions. I actually put together a handout that I will make available to everyone joining here. And then if you're watching this, accessing it later on, there'll be a link in this description box below where you can get these good questions to ask. But that's that's just a list. There's 10, 15 questions on there, and that's just a starting point. When you're actually going to the second cup of tea, the amount of questions that you could ask are infinite. But there's also some bad questions to ask. I know I've done this before. I had an instance where someone had an accent, and I was pretty sure that I knew where the accent was from. And I think I'd already shot myself in the foot with another comment I had made earlier. So this was kind of like my second strike. So we're going for cups of tea. We're not going for three strikes. Okay, 3 cups of tea, not 3 strikes. So this is probably my second strike. I asked the individual where they were from, and I completely got it wrong. And just his reaction was just like, I mean, you should probably stop trying now. So that can happen. Another example that I heard was never ask a woman if she's pregnant. That's another good one to stay away from. You are not a a doctor, and unless you are a doctor, I can't say who's ever gonna watch this, but let's just stay away from those kinds of questions for sure. People's, if they are pregnant or not, or if they've maybe had a recent weight gain, that's between them and their real doctor, not you. So let's stay away from those kinds of questions, and we'll be ready for success. So what to bring to this second cup of tea? Obviously, the phone, once again, the phone serves as so many things for us. Obviously, our schedule I have called out here, but it's also our email. We can access emails. We can pull up a quick Facebook page if we need to do some quick on the fly research. There's so many things that we can access even now with the technology around OneDrive and different products that are out there. You can even access your files, say you forgot something or need to access a resume or what have you that may be on your desktop, but it's saved to one of these Dropbox type things. You can go ahead and access that on your phone. So your phone is going to be an invaluable tool for you. And then just in case this leads into the third cup of tea, you're going to also want to bring employer references, information about your agency, success stories and articles, and a few good resumes that may be a match if you're talking to an employer. You know, for an individual talking to a parent about some program you may want their son or daughter to sign up for. Maybe you have some information about the program, but you're just going to ask those questions, just kind of get a sense in that second cup of tea. But maybe things are going really well and it's looking like they're going to want to utilize that program. That's a great opportunity then for you to break out that information about the program and be prepared. Once again, be prepared. If I could say anything about relationship development, that is it right there. We just need to be prepared. We need to understand, we need to be intentional when we're going to networking opportunities, but just in our day-to-day life, we have to be ready to make these relationships. So with our second cup of tea, I want you to remember it still is relatively short. We said 15 to 30 minutes, a little bit longer if you absolutely need to, but then it is simple as well. It's just questions, maybe 10 to 15 questions you have ready to go beforehand. Maybe you have them memorized. Maybe as you're first starting this off, you have written them down, but it's pretty simple. And then the second cup of tea is at its very essence, it's about getting to the third cup of tea. So this is a progressive process. The first to the second to the third, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to move along that process, not get tripped up, not get a no, I don't want to talk to you anymore. We want to get to that third cup of tea because that's where we actually ask for whatever we're asking for. And then sending a thank you. Just had a meeting yesterday. I sent a thank you note out on that meeting. It's just the right thing to do. It's a classy, respectful, professional thing to do. Sometimes you can write out a handwritten note. That may be very good in certain situations, but you also want to read those. Is it something that is a pretty big deal to get a handwritten note? That would be very much appreciated by whomever receives that. I've received a number of handwritten notes in my professional career, and every time I look at that is pretty cool that somebody took the time out to do that. And then, of course, we are documenting things in Salesforce. Make sure to document and track your interactions. This is very important. This is very helpful if your agency, if someone else is accessing this later on, if they don't use Salesforce, just try to come up with a method that works on your end. Could be a spreadsheet, a Google sheet that tracks interactions that everyone can access. We're thankful and we're lucky to have Salesforce. That is a very important tool because we know who's talking to that employer. We know who's talking to that parent. We know who's talking to that client. And it's very helpful information as we're in that preparation stage of reaching out to someone. So with the third cup of tea, really what that is the ask. This is where we get to that point to asking. In the job development phase, we may be asking for an interview, we may be asking for a tour, we may be asking for money. It may be a fundraising conversation that we're asking that for some support for our organization. There's a lot of different things that we can be asking, but you can see how we have taken our time, we have been strategic, we have prepared throughout the first, the second cup of tea to finally get to this third cup of tea where we actually are comfortable we actually have done the groundwork to make that ask. We didn't do this within the first 10 minutes of meeting the individual. We have laid a foundation in that relationship to get to this ask. Should only take 5 minutes. It's a very quick, straightforward type of thing. Should only take about 5 minutes. So how do we prepare for this? Once again, I've said it a number of times, preparation throughout the process. We're going to review our notes. Ideally, those notes have been shared publicly in a system like Salesforce so that if our colleagues need to jump in on maybe the third cup of tea, maybe you're bringing in someone from fundraising on that third cup of tea, and they're going to make the ask. You're going to make a handoff or something. You have to have those notes. And then, of course, just for yourself, make sure that you're taking notes. Client resumes, for the instance of job development, you're going to want to have those client resumes ready to go. And remember, I said in the second cup of tea, you should already have these things ready to go just in case that second cup of tea progresses to this stage right away. And then for the job development example, you want to be ready to explain client criminal history, maybe some interviewing deficiencies. I mean, as I'm speaking to you, there's probably a number of you that have had this um, experience before. I mean, I've been in a 20, 30, 40-minute meeting and had clients maybe say 5 words before. And I've helped that individual to get that job. And it wasn't because I was constantly, I'm talking a lot today, but I was giving them space to answer the questions, but I knew that they weren't going to engage a lot. I had already prepared that employer to understand that, and they were looking at the individual based on their merits, not just on their ability to check a box in an interview. So that's very important to prepare the person giving the interview, prepare them in a number of different ways that you could probably use that preparation. Just, here's what to expect in a number of different applications, but that's the one that I have experience with, the job development. So here's an example of the third cup of tea. This is really, as I said, nicknamed the ask. This is when we ask for something. So here's what it says. I've been thinking about what you told me about your company and the jobs that are typically difficult to fill. And I have a person in mind that I'd like you to meet. I think he would be a great match for your hiring needs. He's good with details. You could go on and describe this person's strengths, all the beautiful, wonderful, amazing things that this person can do. That's where you're going to say that. And would you like to set up a time for you and I to meet with him? And you may be there, maybe it's just your client. So it's just a very simple, straightforward. This is one, as we're first starting this method, as we're first trying to develop opportunities, relationships, this is something that we might want to write down. For myself, I know when I write things down, it takes some of that fear and that anxiety of what I'm going to say. I want to make sure I get all the right points across. I like that. I like that safety net. Maybe you're someone that works well on the other end of the spectrum without notes. Maybe the notes bog you down and you feel a little confined by them, but maybe it's good to jot down a few bullet points, but making sure you get your points across for all cups of tea, the first, the second, and the third. It's not a bad idea to jot things down, but that's the ask. I included this slide, and it's, many of us probably have seen this if we've ever done a sales function or sales training or anything like that. It is a very important piece of information because, as you can see, only 50% of individuals actually follow up on the prospects, on the whatever it may be that you're doing. And there's a community partner over there that I think would be great for you to partner with, VPI or whatever agency. 50% of the individuals that receive those prospects are actually going to go ahead and follow up on that. So if you just pick up the phone, type the email, whatever it may be, attempt to have that first cup of tea, you're better than 50% of people that are trying to do this same type of stuff. But as you can see, you go down the list, and only 10%, actually 12%, make 3 contacts and stop. So they get to that third cup of tea, and then for whatever reason, they don't follow up after that third cup of tea. But look at that 10%. Only 10% make more than 3 contacts. But then look here, as you can keep going down the list, look at where most of the sales happen. 80% are happening on the 5th to 12th contact. You can see that it's true when you track your contacts in a program like Salesforce. We're not getting paid for by Salesforce for any of this, but it is a good system. Maybe they should pay us for this. We could put in a request, but it is a good system, and it just helps you to track that. You can look and see there may have been multiple contacts within a company. You went through the wrong door, went through the wrong door, went through the wrong door, the right door, 5, 6 contacts with this person, emails and in-person meetings and, phone calls going back and forth. That stat, just anecdotally myself, that stat remains true. So remember that. Don't get discouraged if you hit the wrong door or somebody says no. Try to find a different door. Try to find a different way in. So here are the 3 cups of tea in review. Remember that first cup of tea is the pitch. We are introducing ourselves. What do we want to do? We want to get that second cup of tea. We're talking about that. Second cup of tea, we're just learning about their business. We're asking a ton of questions. Second cup of tea, in a hiring situation scenario, this could be the interview. You're asking all of your interview questions of that candidate, and you can apply it to your situation. That third cup of tea is that ask. Do you want to have an interview with my client? Do you want the job? Will you give me a tour of your business? Whatever you are trying to achieve with that relationship, this is where we ask. Now, I do want to make this disclaimer very quickly here. 3 cups of tea is not always the right approach. What do you mean by that, Matt? You just told me that 3 cups of tea is the best thing since sliced bread, I guess. I don't have anything else that's the best thing since. So, yes, 3 cups of tea is a very successful method. I've used it myself for many years, very successful. However, sometimes people are going to skip right to that third cup of tea and they're going to say, "Hey, what are you looking for?" Be ready for that type of scenario. That's why you have to prepare. You can't just say, "Well, I wasn't expecting that." You need to be expecting that. You need to be ready for all 3 cups of tea really from the jump. So that is a very important disclaimer that sometimes the person you're speaking to is going to go right to that third cup of tea, and you have to at least have a reason or something that you can ask about. So it's not always the right approach. You don't have to stop them and say, "Hey, wait a second here. We're on the third cup of tea. This just isn't going to work out. We got to go to the first cup of tea." Don't do that. However, I will give this further caveat that sometimes, even though they want to go straight to the third cup of tea, you still may have to ask a bunch of questions that will be like a second cup of tea, a hybrid type of situation there. So that is the one disclaimer. Now, as we are transitioning away from the 3 cups of tea, I do have some more general principles that, of course, can be applied within the 3 cups of tea, but some general principles that I think will help you not only on a professional level, but also for sure within your personal relationships. And these methods are from How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's over 30 million copies of this book have been sold since it was released in 1936. So almost everybody has at least heard of this. It's one of those books that a lot of people have heard of. I think a lot of people have read it, but you hear, "Well, I've heard of it, but I haven't read it," type of thing a lot when you bring it up. But actually, the Library of Congress in 2013 ranked it as the 7th most influential book in American history. So this is a book that has influenced a lot of people, and I can see why. The concepts within this book, the principles within this book are sound. So how do we do some of the things that Mr. Carnegie was speaking about. First and foremost, we want to become genuinely interested in other people. Within VPI, this organization, a number of other people that will probably watch this going forward, you are probably going to be in a human services nonprofit context. So somewhere along the line or currently, hopefully you still feel very strongly about helping people. So this may come naturally. But what Carnegie says is that you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can by trying to get them interested in what you do. So that remains true with whatever you're trying to do. If you are interested in other people and what they do, you're going to make more sales. You're going to develop more jobs and opportunities for your clients. You can't just be, I've got to get my job done. I got to get my goal accomplished. You have to be interested in what other people are doing. And then that stuff will be the result of your interest in what they're doing. Number two, this is so simple, but something that not a lot of people do, just simply smiling. At the end of the day, it doesn't take a whole lot. I understand, even sometimes there's dental reasons why people don't smile. Even if you could do a smirk or something like that, or just generally, portraying a happy, positive appearance and outlook on life. That's what this one really is all about. I love this quote that he gives here in the book is that it's an ancient Chinese proverb that says, "A man without a smiling face must not open a shop." And why is that? Nobody's going to come there and buy things. We've all experienced it before. I think he's on the call, but I had a colleague that talked about, it was actually from a different training that I was in, but talked about they were selling brisket at this, well, we won't name it, but it's a famous place that it's a convenience store, but they have all these wonderful different types of meat and brisket, and that's kind of like the big time of the day when the brisket is ready to come out. And the individual came out and they're just like, brisket's ready, and it was just like they were just, like it was just a horrible thing that they had to do, and it was noticed by everybody. And we've all been in those situations. Maybe it's a sandwich shop where everybody is just fired up and they're saying your sandwich is ready or the brisket's ready, and it just lightens your day. That's what this concept is all about. Make sure that when you're trying to build a relationship, when you're trying to influence people, you are positive. You're not, this is the most horrible thing that I'm going to have to do today, but please help me out at the same time. It's not going to work. A smiling face, a man without a smiling face must not open a shop. That's why. Not going to sell anything. Remembering people's names, like the aforementioned stumble that I had, this is not a strength for me. I sometimes struggle with short-term memory. Maybe you have the same issue that I have as well. Put that out of your head. You can remember names. You can be intentional about remembering names. This is one of the takeaways that I was very much impacted by from the book, because it was a weakness for me. So I thought, I really want to work on this, and I really want to try to remember people's names. And really, one of the most important things is when someone says their name, a lot of times we're not even really paying attention. We ask them their name, and then our mind goes off somewhere else. They say it, and they're like, oh man, I missed that. In that moment, the best thing to do is to just stop and say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that, and try to get that name again. Now, you can probably only use that once or twice. You don't want to constantly be doing that, but just making sure you are focused. That's the most important thing. If you ask that question, that's the most important thing going on in the room at that time, what that person's name is. And then the next thing that Carnegie talks about remembering names is to make an impression. So maybe it's a physical feature of this person. Maybe it is they remind you of someone else. Now, this is another one that I've done before, my mistake here. Don't have them remind you of someone else that has a different name, because you may call that person that other person's name. And I have done that before as well. Don't do that. Make sure they have the same name, and that impression is something that's going to help you. And then repetition, saying their name, not out loud, then people will think you're a little strange with that. But afterwards, in your mind, even after the meeting, just go through and do this. Who was at that meeting? Challenge yourself to do that. If remembering names is important to you, and it should be, because a person's name is important to them. Carnegie, actually, from the book, uses this quote. He says that the person's name, a person's name is the sweetest sound to them in the language that they speak. So when somebody says Matt, that I love that name. That's great to me. That's the way people think. That is actually true. People love to hear their name. And then association. You can make associations with different things. That's similar to an impression. But that was his system. Come up with a system that works for you. But I challenge you to be intentional about remembering names. Next principle is be a good listener. This can be applied to every area of our life. We could do millions of trainings on this a year, and the world would be a better place because of it. I love this quote that he uses. It's very powerful if you actually think about it and digest it. A person's toothache matters more to him than a famine in China that kills 1 million people. A boil on his neck interests him more than 40 earthquakes in Africa. Think of that the next time you start a conversation. What does this have to do with listening? People care about themselves, and they want to talk about themselves. They want to talk about their experiences. It doesn't make you, me, or the entire human race selfish. It's just we know the most about our own situation. So it's what's in the front of our mind is ourselves. So when we are trying to influence people, when we are trying to use a relationship to get to an objective, and you're not using people, you're not doing that at all. You're not being deceptive. People know that you have a mission, that you work for a nonprofit, and 9 times out of 10, people are very supportive of that. But you're using that relationship to get to a point. So you want to listen to what that person has to say. They're going to be that decision maker that helps to get you to that goal. That's very important that you listen to what they say. This is Theodore Roosevelt. I want you, if you're going to take the knowledge quiz after this, I want you to remember that name, imprint it in your mind, make an impression of it, what he looks like. I don't think we have a lot of people that rock that mustache anymore, but maybe he reminds you of someone. But talk in terms of the other person's interests. So this is something, reason I have Theodore Roosevelt up here is this is something that he did. He's known to have profusely researched anyone that was going to come to the White House the next day. Obviously, he was a president of the United States. I think I failed to mention that. But anyone who would come and visit the White House, he would research them the night before, and then he would be able to converse with that individual in whatever they were interested in. And it was very impressive to those around him, because they're thinking, this is a president of the United States. He doesn't have time to be looking into whatever it may be. If a person was a expert in, some sort of animal, he would know about that animal. If the person was an expert in, roads and bridges, he would have done his research about infrastructure. And it was very impressive to people. And that will be impressive to the people that you work with when you know about them, when you take an interest about them. It could be something personal about their family. Maybe they have kids, you have kids. You can make that connection there. That is a good opportunity for you to work with them, to influence them, to get to that goal and objective. Lastly, now this is our last principle, and we are quickly wrapping up with the presentation. Make the other person that you're working with feel important. Why is that? Because we want to feel important. We want to feel valued. So we need to Give that out to other people. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's the golden rule, but it's sometimes a rule that we don't follow. We don't think about the different things that we like or that upset us. And, we don't apply those things to how we treat other people. If you do that, you will make people feel important. You'll make them feel valued, and they will help you to achieve your goal. You don't do that, people are going to feel like um, you're just using them. You're trying to walk over them, get around them, or get through them to reach your goal. That's all you care about. Yes, you are hoping that they help you, but you're hoping that they help you because you're doing something good that needs to be done. That's it. We got through it, and I hope everyone took away some of these principles. I hope that this is something that will help you in your professional career, that will help you to become a better job developer, if that's what you're doing, better at developing community partnerships and relationships, sales, whatever you are trying to accomplish, where you need to develop a relationship, where you need to influence someone. I hope that this will help you to do that.